Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you with a rather late conservative leadership race post-mortem. So, I've been busy calculating US stuff, so this slipped a little bit, but I am now on to doing this. So, we are going to cover the results of this race and how my model did compared to other people I can find who are decent and or credible also doing this. Though I will amend that. It's not always people who are credible, because I've also compared myself to CBC, and I don't think CBC itself is very credible. I could be wrong, maybe the person doing it for CBC is good, but I don't trust CBC as an organization. That said, let us begin. So, obviously, this is the total map. Twaliev got 23,000 points to Charest 5,421. Everyone else filling kind of in between. Twaliev got 330 ridings, Charest got 8. I technically forecast 338, but I didn't really have much confidence in my riding level projections because we didn't have the data that I wanted for them. We had a couple of polls early on that had that data, and I was just waiting for more, but more didn't come out. And then we got really close to the end of the race, and I didn't really want to refactor the entire model to have a different method. So I will not be counting the seat or the riding jurisdiction wins in the future, because my model was technically correct, but I don't like how the model did it. So it was right in the least satisfying way possible. Brian Brigade, whatever. I call him Brian. At Too Close to Call, he did riding level projections. He got about 322 and had obviously 16 others for other people. So he was relatively close, and I think most of his were pretty spot on. His riding level ones were actually a lot more accurate than mine were across the board. Though, that said, I wasn't very competent in mine to begin with, so there's that. I probably should have amended that, but considering I didn't really post about them, and I was mostly posting about popular vote by region and points by region, I think that's fine, because this isn't really a race about who wins the ridings, it's a race about points and popular vote. And as always, I seem to be better at popular vote than I am at ridings, though I'm not terrible at ridings. So, if we get down into the raw results, so this is by points. So I have myself listed here twice as bagel polling. So raw is just taking the data from, what's the word for it? From my model. If that makes sense. So the last video I posted for this series, if you just take the numbers in that is raw. But if you are a keen viewer of mine and you watch that and you remember that video, I did say I'm pretty sure the brown vote should go to the Charest column, more or less across the board, maybe some to the Aitchison, but mostly the Charest column. And the reason I still had the brown vote factored in was because the way my model works, it's not nice to just remove the candidate. It's not perfectly accurate. It's less valid. So I don't do that. I was banking on more polls. We didn't get more polls, unfortunately, so my model didn't really have a chance to correct the brown numbers. So they're still there. So there's a matter of interpretation. If I were to be covert about it, I would just secretly have programmed the brown numbers to go to Charest, because me as an analyst think that is what was going to happen. Ish. So raw is what happens if you don't do that. And for sake of... Oh, I made a mistake here. I'm not going to fix that live. That's dumb. My numbers should be... My mean squared error here should be higher, because I forgot to factor the brown mean squared error here. But regardless, the raw numbers are if brown is considered a candidate, and the star is if you interpret it the way I interpret it, and brown goes to charade. So, where does this put us? Well, if we go by raw, I have a mean squared error of about 61. For a 5-candidate race, well, 6 if you count my raw numbers, that's relatively high. I'm not actually super satisfied about a 61. This is for points, I should say. I'm not really satisfied with 61 mean squared error. That's fairly high for 6 candidates. My Canada overall numbers from 2021 was about 5, and I believe my Ontario number was lower. Let's double check it. My France one wasn't particularly good, but if you recall back to the France one, I think there was a lot of pulling error on that one, though I'm not terribly proud of my France one either way. Is it this? No, that's the wrong thing. We're just going to put this over here for a second. One day I'll find this. Here we go. So my overall error was 2. My overall mean squared error in Ontario was 2 with 7 parties, once you count other. So 61, quite high. Now, this is points, so it's not quite accurate, but it is what it is. The points are pretty close to proportional. If we go with my interpretation, we end up getting about 33 mean squared error for the points, which is appreciably better, but still much worse than my Ontario or my 2021 Canada results, though that is significantly better than my France, which I think my France is about 74. Though, again, I blame most of the France one on pulling error, but again, you can go back and watch that video if you care. Or, wait, I think I'm going to do a recap on all the elections this year at the end of the year as like a greatest hits, but that's future meme homes. So, Too Close to Call, or Brian Brigout? I don't know. I'm terrible at pronouncing names, so we'll roll with it. His point projection had a mean squared error of 46, so pretty much slap dab in the middle of the two of mine. And interestingly enough, he skews in a way that constructively interferes with the way my model is skewed. So if you average us, we actually have 5.6, which is pretty good. Though I will note, averaging models isn't statistically valid because what I'm doing isn't... It's transformative. I'm taking basic statistics and I'm transforming them. So unless you transform a different person in a similar manner, they're not comparable metrics. So the way he does it, based on my understanding, is a lot about fundraising, donors, Google Trends stuff like this, and polls. Mine is mostly just polls and correcting for error and stuff like this. And incumbency and a couple other things, historical records, etc. So we're not analogous models. I think it's worth looking at them, but we're not the same, so you can't actually naively average this. This was more out of interest. If you do interest, turns out it's pretty good. That's not valid. It works out this time, but that I would strongly caution against this. Now, the last one here is my live stream poll, if you were watching the live stream for the results. I think my audience is very skewed compared to the base of the Conservative Party. Get an error of 611 for points. Now, to be fair, that's not terribly accurate. But considering the number of respondents and the distribution, I think it's probably pretty accurate. So, we go by popular vote. I did better on the raw, interestingly enough, and slightly worse on the adjusted. It is what it is. Now you might notice that these numbers are the same, but that's my model more or less about the same. So, whatever. Too Close to Call, though, did appreciably worse on the popular vote. Though I will know... Wait, is this correct? I'm not 100% sure. I'm not going to fix this now. Well, I'm going to assume this is correct, and if this is correct... No, this is definitely wrong. This is wrong. I did not update this. Sorry, Too Close to Call. I'm just going to straight up delete this. Too Close to Call, I don't think has his popular vote numbers published. And it definitely wasn't the ones I had there. So that's not fair. So there we go. We corrected this live. The live stream poll did better in popular vote by about 170 mean squared error. That's pretty good job, guys. You're not as skewed. So now if we go by regionals, this actually paints a better / worse picture for my model, depending. So Atlantic, unsurprisingly, as a local of Atlantic, Canada, I did good in Atlantic, Canada. Can you believe it? You hate to see it. The local is good at the local. It's just shocking. So if we go by raw, I'm like on the lower end of tolerable, though better than my national. If we go by how I would project it, how I think as an analyst, it's acceptable. 21 for regional is actually pretty good. National numbers should be lower than the regional numbers if my model is doing correctly, because there's more error. There's more margin of error on the smaller jurisdictions than the larger ones, if that makes sense. So having a larger error on the regional is more acceptable than nationally. I'm not terribly happy with my national errors. My regional for Atlantic Canada, I'm content, if that makes sense. Quebec, I shit the bed. In Quebec, to be honest, I completely and utterly underestimated Charest. You might ask yourself, how could you possibly have underestimated Charest in Quebec? What are you doing, Bagel? And you know what? I don't know. I don't know. I looked through this stuff. I think it's just a matter of weightings a little bit, and the polls. The polls for the leadership races weren't as good as I would like, and they had a very high margin of no respondents, so like we're talking like 30-40% of the sample wasn't responding or had no opinion. So I put some of the blame there, but I think some of this is an over aggressive correction for Poilievre, because I will note my model did correct what I saw was polling error for Poilievre, but I did overcorrect it. Nationally, about 2.2, though it looks like in Quebec, my overcorrection was the highest. Oops. Sorry, guys. When you're trying to correct for polling error is a moving target, so you're gonna make mistakes like this. So I'm gonna just highlight these in some nice bright red for shame. Shame. That was a big miss. These are inexcusable errors here. Sorry, guys. Didn't matter. Sorry. So going into Ontario, my raw numbers weren't great, but again, that's the Brown, so like Brown, we can't even blame Brown for this one. 2.6 is not enough to cost 291. That's entirely Charest and Poilievre misses. In Ontario, actually a lot of this error literally is this. 6.7 squared is a reasonably large number. And if we adjusted how I want to do it with the star, we get about 60, which it's better than my French one. It's tolerable. It's a regional. I'll take it. Not super happy about it. It is what it is. Brian did a fantastic job in Ontario. A 23 as my 21 in Atlantic Canada. That's a solid number for a regional. So he did a good job. His big one is he actually got Baber right, because my biggest miss is Baber and Lewis, and he did a really good job on Lewis and Baber in Ontario. So, props to him. Going to Prairies. This one, Brian didn't do so hot. 238 is pretty bad. That's the wrong one. 238 is pretty bad. How did this add up to 101? Bear with me a second. 16. What? I'm confused. Apparently, oh. There we go, I fixed it. I had an erroneous number written there. Is this also erroneous? No. Well, actually, to be honest. There. Okay, 237. That's a high number. It's better than my Quebec numbers. That's still pretty high. My raw prairies, not good either. 110. That's on the bad end. That's similar to my raw Ontario. Not great. My adjusted, still not very good. 73. That's actually equal to my French-ish. So, So the big story in prairies is both myself and Brian wildly overestimated Lewis and wildly underestimated Sheree. I was very close on Polyev though, so my model worked there. It looks like I pretty much just overcorrected in Quebec for Polyev, to be honest. Like 4 is a little high in Ontario, but that's mostly, I think, underestimating Babber. Sorry. But Atlantic Canada, Prairies, Alberta, BC, North, I wasn't very good, very close on Polyev, so I'll take that. Moving into Alberta, that makes sense, yes. So, Brian did solid, 35. His main thing was he overestimated Sheree. Yeah. Underestimated Polyev a bit. Yeah. I almost nailed Polyev to a decimal point. Sadly, I missed that, so I can't claim that one, but, you know, pretty good. Interestingly, if we do the correction I want to do, we actually get a worse higher mean squared error because I missed Sheree by more. Sheree very underperformed in Alberta compared to what I was expecting, especially considering how much he overperformed in the prairies. I need to double check this. Did I? Oh, I did this wrong. We're correcting things live. I had those backwards. Corrections done. Sorry about that. Brian did 60, which is mediocre in prairies. My uncorrected model did a lot better at 40. This makes much more sense. Oops. You correct it the way I want to correct it. It actually does worse because I overestimate Sheree more. Though, I will still say I did better than Brian in prairies, so haha. 51, still bad. Not as bad as 391. That's failure. Ugh. Moving into BC. I want to double check BC now. Isn't this fun? Let me know in the comments below if you like seeing me fix things live. There we go. And you could be like, Bagel, shouldn't you, like, you know, edit this? No. I don't edit things. I don't like editing. It sucks. Mad respect to people who do edit, but I crunch numbers. I don't edit videos. So moving into BC though. Here, Brian did very good, 24. Once we round. And like several places, if we adjust numbers how I want to adjust them and move the brown to Sheree, I do worse at 38 than if I don't do that at 33. So my rule of thumb isn't great. Probably in some of these places like BC, maybe I should have split the difference and half went to Sheree and half went to Babber, but that would be hindsight, so that is not accurate. So we're not gonna do that. Slightly overestimated Polyev, but it is what it is. The big one here, and also Alberta, is I big underestimate, and I guess prairies, big underestimates for Lewis. I knew going into that forecast, if you watch the video, I figured I was underestimating Lewis. It's just, it was quite hard to correct for it because I knew Polly was eating some of her base. I couldn't really forecast how much of her base he was eating. Because I couldn't naively use error numbers from 2020. because there was a huge amount of error on Lewis in 2020. I couldn't naively do that because she was against different competition completely. So it was kind of hard. It is what it is. Though my big one that this is a smaller one in the Atlantic, but I'm very happy with this one. I did fantastic in the territories. That is not something I ever thought. I did change in 2021 how I was forecasting the territories, which this benefits from. So I guess this is just a vindication that my change in methodology for the territories worked. Huzzah! Because I had a lot of error in the territories in 2021. I don't have that spreadsheet up, so I'm not going to open it, but we go here. Brian now has the 365 error. Das and Bear. You know what? To be honest, I will give him some benefit of the doubt. Territories are harder, so he will get a nicer red. There. Is that even a different color? I don't know. We're going to get rid of this fill. We're going to make him magenta. There we go. He's magenta. Apparently it's the same color I have for Agenson. The more you know. So if we go by raw in the territories, 29, not bad. Adjusted, 22. Pretty good. So that's kind of where we're at here. So just to recap, having got through the results, I wildly underestimated Babber. Wildly is strong. I underestimated Babber and Lewis to a tune of about 2.4 for Lewis. Was it 2.4? Actually, it might be 3.4 for Lewis and about 2.7 for Babber. And I overestimated Polly by about 2.2. And I was actually pretty close on Shrey by default. So it looks like, actually, in hindsight, nationally speaking, most of this brown number really should have went to Babber and Lewis. Would have thought that actually would have lowered my error the most. That I can't just do that because first off, I'm only indulging myself this one with the star because I said in that video, that's how I think you should interpret my data, because Brown isn't running and he has a meaningful number of vote share. I did not say add it to Lewis and Babber. I did say I was probably going to miss on Lewis, and I did miss. So I called my own failure. Do I get bonus points for that? Comment below if I get bonus points for calling my own failure before it's proven that it's a failure. Let me know. Now, we covered how my model did. I'm overall content. This was the first leadership race. Leadership races are different. The polling kind of sucked. Mostly, not necessarily, we didn't really have any polls in the last third of the race, and the polls didn't really have the data density I wanted, so the polling kind of sucked. But I will say, pretty content overall, considering those things. And frankly, I didn't bother doing it because it's a lot of work, but if you put raw polling average here, that would probably be a huge miss. The raw polling average is probably terrible. So, let's just finish this up here. Don't want to go too long, but I will indulge in some analyst stuff. What does this race mean? Does it matter? Is it just a one-and-done leadership race? Well, I will say, I think some people are overdrawing conclusions from this. I didn't personally do it because it's a lot of work and I don't have the time. If I was paid for this, possibly would have had the time to do it, but I don't have the time, so I didn't do it. But if you look at a lot of these ridings on a lot of sub-regions, election over election, leadership race over leadership race, there's a huge surge in conservative support in a lot of areas. Some ridings in Quebec have close to 800% increase in registration numbers and voter turnout. Some people have been drawing conclusions that this might mean that some places are in play, or the Conservatives are going to do better in these areas. Maybe. I won't say that's not going to happen. I won't even say that that is a bad conclusion to draw. I'm just a bit cautious on this. Because, well, the Conservative Party isn't the general population. Even with the fact that it's now 600 and whatever, 78,000 people. That's only about 450,000 voted, and that's not proportional or analogous to the general pop. Now, there's a couple of places where I think you can draw valid conclusions, such as Northern Ontario, because particularly places like Northern Ontario, there's actually not that many people. Some of these ridings, I think Timmins, James Bay up here, I believe that's only about 60,000 people. So less than half of what a district normally is, and there's various reasons for that. We're not going to get into that in this video. But in places like that, there was close to a couple thousand people turn out for this race, for a leadership race. And a huge increase over 2020 in turnout and in membership signups. So in some places, I think this might be indicative of that there might be a groundswell support. Particularly the Quebec numbers, where there's a huge increase in membership in Quebec, I think is relevant. Poilievre got enough votes in Quebec that his Quebec votes alone would put him almost in 4th place in 2020. That doesn't sound very good, but wait, would have put him in 4th place. Wait, I can double check this now. I have this right here. What was it? Yeah, would have put him almost in, like, very close on 4th place with 1 province worth of votes. In Quebec. Keep in mind, if you look at even let's say his Ontario numbers compared to this, he would have pretty much won the race first ballot with just his Ontario turnout. He had about 120,000 people vote for him in Ontario. That wouldn't be a first ballot win, but that'd be like 45% on first ballot with just the Ontario votes. That's shocking. Like, we shouldn't underestimate, in a way, what this means for the Conservative Party. This doesn't have... I would caution, this might not be wrong, but I would definitely caution extrapolations on how this means for a federal election. Because maybe, for example, the Quebec turnout membership increase is just activating the already conservatives in Quebec to be in the party, and it's not increasing the base. That is a valid interpretation. I'm inclined to think it is increasing the base, especially now that we have some Ledger polls and an Ecos poll out that have Quebec very competitive with the Conservatives. But the fact that Poilievre not only wins first ballot, but wins first ballot with 70.7% of the popular vote in a race with nearly 3 times the turnout of 2020, which was a record turnout. Though, to be fair, saying record turnout in a party that's only had 2 leadership races before is kind of dumb. But 460-odd thousand votes is a record for all Canadian parties, period, ever, as far as I'm aware. If you go back far enough, that'd be a good election turnout. And the fact that he got 70.7% first ballot, and odds are, most of these Lewis and most of these Babber voters would have had Poilievre their second or third choice. So you went to a 4th ballot, he probably would have gotten nearly 90% of the vote, probably about 85, let's say. He has 85% of the party probably as his first and second choice. like, I cannot understate here how much this puts Poilievre in control of the party. He already had the majority of the caucus, about 62 members, officially supporting him, and I think a lot of the shadow cabinet intrinsically supported him, such as Candice Bergen. Candice Bergen is effectively one of Poilievre's close allies, though she's retiring for next election, so that's not going to be super relevant. But not only does he have a large amount of the caucus supporting him, which O'Toole didn't, Scheer didn't, he has an overwhelming control of the party's base. What this means is, unlike O'Toole, unlike Scheer, he kind of has a carte blanche to execute his strategy. And he doesn't have to worry about getting a knife in his back because he commands the party. This is basically the closest to universal consent you could get. I would say that even in the event, which I don't think is very likely based on the current trend of polling, but even in the event that Poilievre loses the next election, I think he can stay on for a second. He might even be able to stay on for a third, especially if he continues, as he has for the last about 2 weeks, pretty much staying the course. That's one of the big things that hurt O'Toole, is he immediately started pivoting towards the center. Poilievre has made no indication that he's staying on his line, and to a large extent, he has the carte blanche to do this because he has overwhelming support in the party. This is effectively Poilievre's party at this point. Now, unlike some analysts or pundits, I would even hard to capture these people as analysts, this isn't the case that Poilievre captured the party. This isn't, for example, not that I think Poilievre's anything like Trump, for better or worse. This is not like Trump in the Republican Party, where Trump came in and has basically captured the Republican Party. And not in a dictatorial way. He's basically destroyed and replacing the establishment status quo of the Republican Party, which, if you've watched any American videos, is kind of what I've been referring to as the America First takeover. It's an ideological transition of the Republican Party. This is not an ideological transition of the conservative base. Poilievre didn't conquer the Conservative Party. Poilievre is the manifestation of the Conservative Party. If the Conservative Party had a ghost, that's a weird way to phrase that. If it had an avatar, the Conservative Party manifested an avatar to represent it in Parliament. That is effectively what Poilievre is. He is as close to what would be the Conservative Party as the current establishment grassroots thought. And I say both at the same time because it's a mesh. It's both the establishment and the grassroots. They're both in an agreement, and they both agree with Poilievre. Again, the Republican Party analogy. Trump coming in was the grassroots and Trump in alignment with the party establishment disagreeing. And the party establishment is slowly being replaced with new establishment who agree with the grassroots and agree with Trump. And some people make it sound like it's dictatorial for Trump, and no, but if you want to see stuff on that, comment below and I can talk about that in a US video. However, when you look at the core establishment members of the Conservative Party that I think actually matter in 2022, you look at people like Scheer, you look at people like Candice Bergen, you look at people like Poilievre, you look at I can't think of other people off the top of my head, but there's a couple other core ones. they have the same line of thought in the same worldview as Poilievre. When you actually look at them, they actually speak out. So the establishment of the party actually agrees with Poilievre. And I think this is another reason why you saw O'Toole get stabbed in the back so quickly. Scheer got kicked out largely because of a scandal. Though, frankly, I personally don't think that was a good justification, but that's a whole nother can of fish. O'Toole was destroyed because he disagreed with the establishment of the party and the grassroots. O'Toole was actually kind of what the left wing sees Trump as to the Conservative Party. O'Toole to the Conservative Party is what the left thinks that Trump is to the Republicans, though Trump is actually in agreement with the Republican grassroots. So the left wing is wrong with that interpretation, but that is kind of what they see. Poilievre is, in a way, kind of the Trudeau of the Conservative Party. Hopefully, for Conservatives and Canada, Poilievre is not going to be Trudeau. He's not going to act like Trudeau when he governs. But if you look at the Liberal Party, Trudeau comes in, breezes through the leadership race, universal assent effectively, and the establishment in the grassroots Liberal Party strongly agreed with Trudeau in 2015. He slowly lost this some a bit going forward, but he keeps winning elections, so he has that going for him. I think if he loses an election, the party's probably going to abandon him at this point. But in 2013-2015, Trudeau had that position. He's since, I think, drifted away. I think he kind of doesn't want to be Prime Minister anymore, but the Liberal Party is also in shaky grounds. Poilievre has the same opportunity. The question just remains, does he act better than Trudeau did? It's hard to say, for now. I'm inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I voted for the man, Poilievre. So, of course I would say that. But, you can be the judge below. Comment what do you think. Comment if you think I'm really off base, or if I'm crazy, or if I'm, I don't know, need to relax. I don't know. Comment also what you thought. What do you think of the model? Think I did a good job? Think I did a bad job? I will say overall, just to finish here, I don't actually think there's anything in this model to change. There's maybe a few techniques I'm going to tweak, but I don't really talk about techniques because techniques are kind of trade secret. Sorry. But overall, I think I'm content with the non-trade secret ways my model works. So you're probably not going to hear much about how I've changed things. Like I said earlier in the video, I changed how I treat the territories, but that's a trade secret on my end. Because it's not math related, it's not trivial, it's not objective things like how I use urbanicity data, which is the last thing I've changed. It's a technique on how I interpret the polls to project territories. That's a technique. That's trade secret. It's easy working. But that's where we are. So there's probably not going to be any changes from the model based on this one. Even though I did have more than I like, I think the error is a largely polling error. Or not really even polling error, but just the lack of quality polls. There's a slight difference between polling error and lack of quality polls. I don't think, per se, any of the pollsters were super wrong. They did underestimate Poilievre quite a bit. Duh. But, and this big but, my main issue with the polls is they didn't have the raw data I wanted. They didn't break it down by like demographics as much, or by regions. Oh, they did break it by region, sorry. Not really by demographics as much as I'd like. So there was a lot more guessing and checking on my end. But mostly I think this is kind of a technique thing that it's kind of hard, which is polling corrections, polling error correction, and again, the quality polls. So probably not going to be any changes. Is what it is. But otherwise, if you like the video, I mean, it really helps the channel if you like, share, and subscribe. And, well, I will just say one last note here. Halifax is about to have a hurricane hit later the day of this video being live. So depending on whether I have power, we may or may not see a Quebec update on Sunday. But if I do have power, you will. So it's kind of a fun game. Will there be a Quebec update? Take your bets. Please bet that I do have it, because I'd rather have power. But with that, I wish you all adieu, and I will see you, hopefully, on Sunday.